back to the tasting. Now this
Right.
chart, which I've called a simple method for tasting, it doesn't look that simple, but I assure you it is. And basically what the way I taste, and I have this in my mind, as I explained to Mark, I plagiarized it from some of the greatest winemakers in the world. I stole their ideas and put it all on one sheet of paper. And this is the way I taste. So firstly, the first left-hand column, what it looks like, color and appearance, which gives you a hint as to what it might taste like, whether it's very pale and green, or whether it's sort of rich and golden amber. If it's very pale and green, it might taste watery and a bit acidic. If it starts to become nice and yellow, it's probably richer. And if it's really amber and gold, it's either oxidized or it's sweet, or it comes from somewhere really hot, where the color is extracted from the grape skins. And then appearance, again, is it watery, thin, pale? Is it fairly normal? Or is it heavy, cloying, and viscous? And if it's heavy and cloying and viscous, it's most likely to be full of alcohol, which makes it look like that, or full of sugar, which makes it look like that. If it's watery and thin, that's likely to be the way it tastes. So just by looking at a wine, you can actually get a fair idea of what it's like. I've got noise in the background. So that's the first thing, very easy. Have a quick look at it, see what it looks like. The next bit starts to become more interesting, and that's what you get when you watch TV programs and people talking about wine tastings. When you look at those TV programs, they all talk about the smells and tastes, and they come up with all sorts of things. It's a bit grassy, or there's a smell of asparagus. They talk about gooseberries with New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. And they talk about leafy, grassy characters with Sauvignon Blanc. And they talk about grapefruit with some German grape varieties like Scheurebe. And then white peach, pear, and citrus with sort of ordinary Chardonnays and sort of more warmer climate places. And then as you get to warm places, you get the tropical fruits. You even get sort of tangerines, pineapple, mango, kiwi, passion fruit, and even bananas. And that's for hot climate. And it's because the acids and the flavors develop in a very warm climate, much better than they do in a cold climate. So the German wines we're likely to be we're tasting this evening will come down the sort of lime, grapefruit, green, grassy, leafy, gooseberry, that sort of that lemony probably quite a lot, because it's a cool climate, Germany. Whereas if you're tasting big Australian wines or from a really hot part of Australia or California, you're much more likely to get white wines that have sort of mango, kiwi, papaya, things like that. And southern Rhones, around the Mediterranean, white wines have those sort of characteristics. So by just smelling and pinpointing where they come from, what the smells are, you can get a very good idea what sort of climate they come from. So if one's, tasting blind, and somebody says to Mark, now come on, Mark, you should know what this wine is. That will give him, if he can pinpoint the fruits, that will give him a very good idea. He said, yeah, I think it's Montrachet. So that's that smell, and that's just on the nose. And if I told you that 90%, in my view, 90% of wine tasting is using the nose, the smell. And a lot of people forget how to use their nose because they get on a tube train and they get pollution from traffic and everything else. So the nose gets blocked up and they don't use their nose as much as we used to when we're younger, or animals do use their nose. And so you have to get back to learning how to smell, because 90% of it is. And you know that because if you have a cold and you hold your nose, you can't taste a thing. Or if you just pinch your nose, you can't taste the thing. Whereas all the flavors and tastes come through here. The mouth does a completely different job. The mouth does acidity at the side of the tongue, side of the mouth, sweetness and fruitiness on the front of the tongue, and bitterness and earthiness and things like that towards the middle and the back of the tongue. So it's a combination of the use of the mouth and the tongue and all the aromas from the smell that gives you the overall impression. So then we come on to the third column and getting into the middle of my table, which is quite a complex list of things. Again, smells and tastes, and these are smells and tastes when you taste the wine together, and we'll taste a wine in a minute. And basically what I've done here, not necessarily for you guys, but for people who really want to pinpoint exactly what these wines are blind, I've divided it up into things that are affected by where it comes from. I've called them terroir characteristics. In other words, smells and tastes that are affected by where it's grown. That's the first sort of bracket at the top. Then I've said what the winemaker can do. So, you know, the winemaker's like the cook in the kitchen. He can use oak, he can blend, he can use yeast contact with the in the fermentation, he can retain acidity, he can take the acidity, change the acidity from being malic acid, which is the acid, the green acid you get in a green apple, which most grapes have lots of malic acid, and you can change it to lactic acid, which is sort of acids you get in milk and cheese. And he can put it through a secondary slow fermentation, which does that. And then, so that's what a winemaker can do. He can play around with it to give it character. And then the last thing that gives a wine complexity and character is its aging. And we all know that, you know, if you keep a wine for a few years, you get more away from the fruitiness only, and all sorts of other interesting flavors develop. So there's a sort of cornucopia of different smells and tastes there, which you can divide up into three main areas. What comes from the place, what comes from the winemaking, and what comes from aging. And then the last column, the far right, is the most important bit. And that's, is this wine any bloody good, or is it rubbish? So the quality level. And that's really what we're aiming for. And that's interestingly when you hear people on TV talking about wine, they never get on to really talking about it. They just say they like it or they don't. They never got on to why they like it and what it is that makes a wine great. And so I've tried to identify here what makes a wine great and really valuable and worth sticking with, and where you want the next glass. And the first area is complexity. So it's all that stuff in the middle column. I mean, if you just have a simple wine like the Liebfraude, there's nothing very complex about it. It's like a sort of Carling Black label of wine. It's fresh, it's clean, it's well made, and it tastes fruity. End of story. Not much else going on. There's a bit of alcohol, but end of story. It's a bit dull, but nice. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's sort of wines you have in the fridge and you have a glass when you're thirsty, or you've just got a sandwich and you want a quick glass of wine. That's fine, but it's not. It's not great wine, but the complexity is the first thing that really makes a wine interesting. So every sip you see something else and something different, and it just makes it much more interesting. I use the analogy of paintings and music. I mean, if you have a great painting at the bottom of your stairs, every day you come down, Raphael or something like that, every time you come down and walk past it, you see something different and more amusing, more interesting in it. You never get bored with it. You grow to love it. And I think it's the same with wine. You never get bored with Chateau Lafite or Montrachet. Every time you taste it, you see something different, something more interesting in it. Or you never get bored with listening to Bach. Every time you listen to it, something triggers. So that's the first thing. Persistence is the next thing. It's difficult to get a persistence in wine. A lot of winemakers give it lots of alcohol, because alcohol gives you a good wodge of taste and flavor. But actually, if you have too much alcohol, it tends to mask some of the more delicate and intriguing flavors and tastes. And so I'm not talking here about big weighty wines. I'm talking about wines that are intense. The flavors are intense, and that the flavors linger in the mouth. Wine people call it, this wine's very long. In other words, the taste goes on and on and on and on. It doesn't mean a great blockbuster of a wine. It just means that it's intense and persistent. So I use persistence. And then there's the finish of the wine. So once you've swallowed it, can you still taste it? Are the tastes nice? Are they sweet? Are they dry? Are they fresh? And the reason that I put that in, and I think it's very important with a great wine, is when you taste a great wine, you don't need to drink lots of it, because the flavors go on. So when you're eating, you can still taste it, and it works with the food. And that's a sign of a really good wine. If you've got a wine that hasn't got much taste or flavor, you tend to drink quite a lot of it to help the food. But with a great wine, you find you don't drink so much. So the finish Is it complex? Is it simple? Is it dry and fresh? And does it work? So that's persistence is important. Then the next bit is what I call balance. Mark knows, because I've done some of these wine dinners, I get up on a chair and pretend I'm an aeroplane flying about, and I say, well, this wing is acidity and this wing is fruit. And if you've got too much acidity, the wine tastes sharp and you know, it's highly acidic and sharp. If it's balanced with plenty of fruit, that's fine. But if there's not enough acidity, it tastes flabby. So this balance of fruit and acidity is really important. And then you've got the body. That's the intensity of flavor. I've got lots of it. Sort of gutsy middle here. That's all the flavor. And then you've got the thing that makes the aeroplane fly, if you like, the kerosene, the fuel. And that's the alcohol in wine. So if you've got too much alcohol, you've got a big black vapor trail coming out the back, and it's heavy and clumsy, and it overpowers everything. But the balance between fruit, acidity, body, and alcohol, if it's seamless and you don't notice any of them, it just tastes really, really good, and you want the next sip. And so for me, balance and elegance is what I always judge a wine on, whether it's really balanced and elegant. And what will be interesting here is that we're going to taste some quite sweet wines, because the Germans make sweet wines. They're famous for their sweet wines. And again, I'll tell you a bit of history about that, because that's quite interesting. Anyway, that's balance, I think, is important. But the German wines, you'll see there's some sweet wines, but they've got wonderful acidity. And that great acidity will balance the sugar, and they will just taste seamless. And we'll see that with when you get to taste the wines. And then the last thing I've got here is structure. And that means, has it got enough of the things that make a wine last a long time? So can you keep it in your cellar for 25, 30, 50 years, and it'll be great, if not get better? And the things that give structure are acidity, the backbone of flavor and taste. Does it have aging potential because of that? And then the little diagram is, because people tend to forget that 0.1% is great, of all wine production is great wine. 1% is sort of what I call class growth, so complex wine is typical from where it comes from. And then about 5% is sort of good premium wine. And the rest, 95%, is basically quaffing, everyday quaffing wine, nothing special, but you know, it's what people drink in Italy in their villages, or in France, or anywhere, any wine growing area. And you know, most supermarket wine falls into that category. And so it's the top 5% that is really good wine, great wine.
Just, I remember, Christopher, you explained that aeroplane analogy with the overall balance. And I also remember you explained it a little bit like when you go to a wonderful classical concert, and when they're all tuning up the instruments, all independently playing away and tuning, it sounds all disjointed and more of a noise. And then when they start the first overture, and it all comes together brilliantly, and they're all harmonized.
Exactly that.
The same with the good wine. There are no hard edges or extreme.
And exactly that. And a good conductor will make sure that it all sort of sits together. If somebody's playing too loudly or not loud enough, they will encourage them or push them down, push them away. So getting that elegance and that balance and its seamlessness, I call it seamlessness, is really the challenge and the difficult thing. And a winemaker should be aiming for that the whole time.